All right, so we're looking at a situation here where we have an electrician and he charges a certain amount of money. You see the graph here, where on the y-axis we have the money that he charges and the hours that he works. And the graph does kind of go off the page. It's somewhat brief, but we can still get the gist of this by looking at this information. So you'll be asked questions like, what's the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept, of course, is where it crosses the y-axis. That's where x is 0. And you can see clearly it's 50 here. Well, another thing to notice, the y-intercept would be when x is 0. So what does this 50 mean? Well, that appears to be what the electrician makes for just showing up. Even if he doesn't work any, he gets $50 for his trouble of driving out there. So this would be an original amount. So this $50 is an original amount. Okay. And then you may get a question about what's the slope? And remember, sometimes they call slope the average rate of change. Well, on this graph, if you follow my little arrow here, if I rise 1, 2, 3, and you can tell these blocks are going by tens here, that looks like a rise of 30. So I'm going 30 up, and I'm going 1 over, because on the x-axis, my scale is only 1 per block. So my slope would be 30 over 1, or just 30. Well, what would that represent? Well, that would represent how much he makes an hour for working. So this is hourly wage. Okay, again, they call that the average rate of change. For every hour that goes by, the electrician makes $30 more. Now they may say something about, is it increasing or decreasing? Well, clearly this is increasing. He's going to make more money for working more hours. That makes sense. If they ask you to write an equation, we would say y equals 30x plus 50. See the previous video on this one. 30 is, it's like y equals mx plus b, where 30 is your m value, your slope, and 50 is your b value, or y-intercept. So if you plug a 1 in there, for example, 30 times 1 is 30, 30 plus 50 is 80. He makes $80 for working 1 hour. If you put a 2 in there, 30 times 2 is 60, 60 plus 50 is 110. That's what he makes for 2 hours, and so forth. And they may ask you a question, if he works 3 hours, how much money does he make, or she, if it's a woman. If we go over 3, you can just follow it up, and you can see, a lot of times you'll see folks just draw lines. This may not be a perfectly straight line, but then draw over. So if you work 3 hours, it looks like you make $140. And if we had enough of the line, we can answer that question for many hours. And what if they say, what's the domain and range for the part of the graph that you can see? And I erased a little bit after that. Let's say the job takes up to 3 hours. Well, the domain, remember, is every possible x. Write it somewhere else. I go over here. The domain is every possible x. And the range is every possible y. So the domain, he could work no time at all, up to 3 hours, looks like, with what we can see, if it's a 3-hour job. The range here would be 50, because remember, he's going to make $50 regardless. And it looks like the most he would make, and this, the largest possible y would be 140. Okay, remember, domain is x, range is y, and domain usually, the x is usually time, as it's the independent variable. Okay, so just a couple questions they may ask you about a linear situation.